Dr. Frazier, that microphone records, it doesn't amplify well, and there are two big fans here, so we ask all the witnesses to please keep your voice up even louder than maybe you're used to, because in the back, the gallery can't hear us from up here.
Understood.
All right, sir. Thank you. Dr. Frazier, I want to go through some of your background first. Do you currently hold any license within the state of Connecticut?
I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Okay, and tell us, what is a licensed clinical psychologist, sir?
It's a specialization in psychology that's recognized nationally in the field of clinical psychology, and that's the license that I hold and practice here in Connecticut.
Okay, and as a clinical psychologist, do you see patients? Do you evaluate patients? What exactly do you do in your practice as a licensed clinical psychologist?
Yes, so I should also make the distinction that I have an area of expertise and specialization called forensic psychology, so I'm recognized as a clinical and forensic psychologist, which essentially encompasses what I've done for the totality of my professional career, working as an evaluator or a court-appointed evaluator, and sometimes in instances like this, as an expert witness.
Okay. And the term forensic, could you tell us what that means, please?
Yeah, forensic is an area of academic concentration in the area of psychology. People who get advanced degrees in clinical psychology can specialize in that, and then you are recognized as a clinical forensic psychologist. It's the intersection between psychology and the law. So in a day-in, day-out basis, the area of my work is almost always court involved in some capacity.
Doctor, let's just zip through your educational background. Do you hold a bachelor's degree?
Yes, I do.
From where?
Fordham University.
Okay, and what was that degree in, sir?
Psychology.
Okay, and then did you matriculate into a master's degree?
Yes, and then a doctoral degree.
Okay, and where did you attend for your, let's start with your master's degree, sir.
That was at Miami Institute of Psychology.
Okay, and when you say you got a master's, was that in clinical psychology?
Yes.
Okay, that was the concentration of the master's?
Yes.
All right, and then, sir, I think you just told us that you also have a doctorate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and where did you obtain the doctorate degree?
Same institution.
Same institution, okay, and how long ago was that?
A long time, but I completed my program in 2001.
Okay.
That's when I earned my doctoral degree.
Okay, so 2025, about 24 years, does that sound right?
At least.
Okay, that's wonderful. Doctor, do you have an appointment as a fellow at the Yale University School of Medicine?
Well, I did. That's where I completed my pre-doctoral work and my postdoctoral psychology fellowship. So the postdoctoral fellowship is a year of additional training and practice under the supervision of other professors. And then afterwards, I was fortunate to be appointed as an assistant clinical professor there as a part-time voluntary faculty, which I've maintained through the present time.
Okay, and sir, as an assistant clinical professor at the Yale School of Medicine, what do you do there for the institution?
Every training cycle, I'm appointed a psychology fellow who I provide supervision for. I provide seminars by invitation at various points during the year, and I also consult with other organizations within the institution when requested.
Do the students in the Yale School of Medicine matriculate through various programs there?
So the individuals, the graduate students that I supervise, they're essentially training to become psychologists like myself, clinical psychologists. So they are in the clinical psychology fellowship program as interns, and then some continue on as postdocs, postdoctoral students, and those are the individuals that I regularly see each year.
And you've held that position, I think I heard you just say, for about 22 years, is that correct?
Since 2003.
Okay, great. And sir, have you also served as an adjunct professor at any other institutions?
Yes.
Where?
One was at the University of Hartford, and the second was at Quinnipiac University.
Okay. Sir, do you maintain a private practice as a clinical and forensic psychologist?
Yes.
Okay, and tell us where that is and what your practice involves.
Yes, so as I testified to earlier, I routinely conduct evaluations of children, adolescents, adults in various court-involved matters. That could be in family court, it could be in civil court, juvenile court, criminal court, and sometimes in probate court. So in many of those instances, I evaluate people or I consult on cases with law firms or lawyers. And then in some instances, those engagement result in my expert testimony in those courts that I described.
Thank you. Sir, have you provided expert witness testimony in the past in criminal courts?
Yes.
And how about in the civil courts?
Yes.
Juvenile court?
Yes.
And I think you also mentioned the probate court. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, Dr. Frazier, were you retained by my office as an expert witness in the matter of State versus Jose Morales?
Yes.
Okay. And were you compensated for that, sir?
Yes, for my time.
Okay. And how were you compensated?
Payment from your office.
Okay. The check didn't bounce.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. And sir, just tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what was your assignment when you were retained as an expert in this case?
Yes, so it was similar to most engagements in which I'm provided a large amount of documents to review, and in this particular assignment, specifically to focus my attention on PCP.
Okay. Now, Doctor, in your professional experience, have you treated patients that have used PCP?
It was a long time ago, back when I was a predoctoral and postdoctoral psychology fellow, but treated, so that would be the treatment distinction, meaning therapy of some sort. Afterwards, I haven't done any treatment or very, very little, and not specifically with that type of, with addiction. My involvement with PCP afterwards were specifically in the context of evaluations.
Okay. So, Doctor, the assignment that you undertook here, this was not the first time that you became familiar with PCP use. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Now, we're going to go slow here. And, Doctor, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen jury what is PCP?
Yeah, PCP is a very dangerous drug. It's a controlled substance.
Okay. And, Doctor, is PCP a prescribed medication where you would go to a druggist or a pharmacy and obtain PCP?
No, it's what we would call a street drug because of its high level of danger, high level of toxicity.
And, sir, is PCP what's called a controlled substance like cocaine or heroin?
Yes, and
Okay.
it goes by the name phencyclidine, but on the street it's sometimes referred to as angel dust, things like that.
Okay. So street drugs have street names. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And you said things, PCP can be known as angel dust, for example. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you know, how was PCP originally developed for what use?
Yep. So it was originally developed back in the 1950s, and it was used mostly in veterinary medicine.
Okay. And was it an anesthetic for the animals in veterinary medicine?
Yes.
Okay. And just tell us what an anesthetic is.
So technically it was called a dissociative. It's been classified or referred to in the research as a dissociative anesthetic, which is basically a substance that basically numbs the nervous system and changes the nervous system, has effects on perception, things of that nature.
Doctor, can the ingestion of PCP cause mind-altering effects?
Yes.
Okay. In what degree?
So this particular controlled substance is well known for causing mind-altering effects, very harsh mind-altering effects, breaks in reality, loss of perceptual functioning, meaning using your perceptions, your senses accurately, correctly.
Could you
And
give us an example? I don't mean to interrupt. Could you give us an example of that?
so some of these distortions and breaks in reality that are a consequence of PCP ingestion include things like delusions. Delusions are false beliefs. It also includes symptoms like hallucinations, seeing things or hearing things that are not real. And those are essentially what we typically would see in individuals that suffer from a psychiatric illness called schizophrenia, which we broadly refer to as psychosis. So you may hear the word psychosis or a psychotic break. Those are the kinds of symptoms associated with the illness schizophrenia. But with respect to the PCP substance, those symptoms emerge when people take and ingest PCP.
Can PCP cause hallucinations,
Yes.
distorted perceptions of reality?
Yes.
Can it cause distorted perceptions regarding
At this point
sounds?
to the leading, Your Honor, he's leading the witness. The witness should be able to testify as an expert from his own memory without it being led to him.
I'll withdraw the question.
All right, so the question is withdrawn. They were leading. I will go ahead and instruct you to carry on then since it was withdrawn.
Doctor, in regard to your discussion there with hallucinations, can you just indicate for ladies and gentlemen of the jury how the use of PCP can affect your ability, your auditory ability?
So PCP affects the auditory ability essentially like I was describing before. It causes hallucinations, meaning hearing things that aren't real, that aren't actually present in that moment. So that is an example of a break with reality. Reality is what's happening in front of you.
Doctor, can PCP be ingested in a variety of ways?
Yes.
Okay, and just tell the ladies and gentlemen jury how.
So most often it's smoked, but it can also be snorted, and it can also be used. It can also be ingested through intravenous, with a needle of some sort.
Okay. Doctor, please, I'm sorry if this is repetitive. I just want you to tell us what a hallucination is.
So in general, there's the two most common types of hallucinations are auditory hallucinations, which I already discussed, and also visual hallucinations. There can be other types as well, but those are the two most common. Visual hallucinations are seeing things that aren't real. In other words, imagining that you are seeing something that isn't actually there and believing that it is there.
Sir, you indicated earlier that PCP is a dissociative drug. What does dissociative mean?
Yes. So dissociation is a clinical term, which means that you are not present in the moment. You are not actually perceiving things accurately in that moment. So it's often discussed as sort of like a phenomenon of daydreaming, except that daydreaming experience continues. That's dissociation.
Sir, can PCP be an addictive drug?
It is an addictive drug.
Okay, and tell us what addictive drug means.
Yeah. So an addictive drug essentially means that when someone ingests a substance, it has an effect on them that changes their behavior, their thinking, their feelings. And when they stop using that drug, they go through an experience in which they have desire, what we call cravings in the addiction field, to go back and use that substance to have the same effect. Over time, it develops into what we call tolerance, which means that they need a greater amount of the substance to have the same effect. And this is what leads to dependence.
And can the drug PCP come in varying strengths?
Yes.
All right. Doctor, you had mentioned this earlier. Just tell ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please, what is schizophrenia?
Schizophrenia is a psychiatric illness, and it is primarily hallmarked by delusions, false beliefs, and hallucinations, which I already discussed.
And doctor, what's paranoia?
Paranoia is a clinical term, and it's generally a clinical term that describes people that are highly suspicious about something harmful happening to them.
Okay. Doctor, if an individual were to ingest PCP repeatedly over a 4 or 5 day period, what effect would you expect to observe?
So ingesting any substance over several days means that the substance stays in the body. It stays within the brain, depending, of course, on the frequency of use and depending, of course, on the amount of use. So repeated use over a period of days with PCP means that there would be an ongoing experience of intoxication from the substance in the body.
Okay. And doctor, what effect does the repeated use of PCP have on the user's memory?
Yeah. So it's been well researched in peer-reviewed articles and hospital data and the National Institute on Drug Abuse that people who ingest PCP very frequently experience what's called PCP-induced amnesia, which means that they forget the experience. Some individuals forget the experience completely while they're intoxicated, so while the drug is in their system, and some individuals experience partial amnesia. So while they're intoxicated, they do not remember part of that period of time. They have no recollection of it.
So if I understand you correctly regarding the PCP-induced amnesia, it can be short in duration or long in duration, is that correct?
It varies based on a couple of factors. So one of the factors would be how much of the drug was actually ingested, over what period of time, was it repeatedly ingested, and that would have varying effects depending on those factors.
And also, I take it the strength of ingesting the drug.
Objection, Your Honor, he's leading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Which one? Doctor, can the what other factors regarding the strength of the drug?
Same leading, Your Honor. What are the factors?
I haven't finished the question.
Let me hear the whole question.
Yeah. What other factors can lead to PCP-induced amnesia?
Overruled. You may answer.
So just to clarify and maybe reemphasize, so the PCP...
Your Honor, I'm going to object. It's non-responsive. He's now he's attempting to clarify. There is no question pending asking him for clarification.
All right, so
I would
I
ask that
would
he answer the
instruct
question that was asked of him.
Attorney Stein, sustained. I would ask the witness to please answer the question.
We have the question read back by the monitor, please.
Certainly. Madam Monitor. You may answer.
So just to clarify and maybe reemphasize, so the
Your
PCP...
Honor, I'm going to object. It's non-responsive. He's now he's attempting to clarify. There's
Take your time.
objection, Your Honor. He's leading.
Sustained.
Which one? Doctor, can the what other factors regarding the strength of the drug?
Same leading, Your Honor. What are the factors?
No, I believe he finishes the question. If you
Yeah.
could just continue. Thank you.
Okay. You're doing fine.
Overruled. You may answer.
So
Is that where you wanted to start though?
It
Yes.
was the question.
What other
PCP,
factors?
yeah. Induced, yep, amnesia.
Thank you. I know it's difficult. I apologize. Thank you.
Amnesia, it can be short in duration or long in duration, is that correct?
it varies based on a couple of factors. So one of the factors would be how much of the drug was actually ingested, over what period of time, was it repeatedly ingested, and that would have varying effects depending on those factors.
And also, I take it the strength of ingesting the
Objection, Your Honor. He's leading.
Sustained.
which one? Doctor, can the what other factors regarding the strength of the drug?
Same leading, Your Honor. What are the factors?
I haven't finished the question.
Let me hear the whole question.
Yeah. What other factors can lead to PCP-induced amnesia?
Overruled. You may answer.
So
You okay? All right,
Thank you.
So, doctor, the question is, what other factors can lead to PCP-induced amnesia?
there's no additional primary factors.
Okay. Just, if you could just tell us, just refresh our recollection. in regards
Your Honor, I'm going to object to refreshing recollection. He's answered the question.
All right. So, Attorney Stein, I understand we're not going to refresh our recollection, but Attorney Gavin, I'm going to sustain the objection to the extent of the form of the question.
Okay. Doctor, what's the term chronic mean?
Chronic means for an enduring or significant period of time.
Okay. And doctor, can individual users develop PCP dependence?
Yes, they can, and they frequently do because of its strong dependence factors, meaning that people become addicted to it very easily and very quickly.
Great. Sir, what is acute PCP intoxication?
Acute PCP intoxication occurs once the substance is ingested. and the intoxication has a number of symptoms and features associated with it, such as agitation, aggression, psychotic symptoms like I described, such as paranoid thinking or other delusional thinking, hallucinations like I already described, partial or full amnesia for part of the period of intoxication and sometimes thereafter.
Just about done, Doctor. Doctor, you told us that you undertook some research in regard to PCP-related amnesia. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and just tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what did your research disclose, sir?
So the research on substance abuse in general and PCP more specifically is pretty abundant. There's a lot of research that's constantly going on over many, many decades. And the research that I reviewed essentially described what I testified to about today, and specifically about the symptoms that I described today, and that this has been documented in research-based studies, in hospital patients, and that it's consistently seen as an outcome of PCP intoxication. In other words, it's not just the people that I have seen, that I have evaluated, or that I have been professionally involved with, that there is a collective group of professionals, research scientists, practitioners who have documented and published the same kinds of findings.
And Doctor, what's the definition of amnesia?
Amnesia is a form of not remembering, so it's memory loss.
And can PCP users, as you described, have amnesia, and can that be restored over time?
So amnesia is not generally restored over time. Think of it like a tape recorder. The mind is not a perfect tape recorder, and things that are not remembered generally remain that way, and if they are remembered, they're fragmented memories.
Thank you. I have no other questions. Attorney Stein may have some questions for you. Thank you, Doctor.
Going back to starting with your qualifications, you are a psychologist, is that correct?
Clinical psychologist.
So that's because you don't have a PhD, you have a PSYD, is that what it is?
Well, my license is in clinical psychology, which is recognized by the state of Connecticut, and my doctoral degree, the actual diploma, is a doctoral degree of psychology.
Okay, but that is a PhD degree, right? You are not a medical doctor.
I am not a medical doctor.
Thank you. And in fact, a medical doctor with the background that you have would be a psychiatrist, is that right?
Could be.
And in fact, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who is able to prescribe medication, is that right?
Objection to the form of the question and the relevancy.
Cross-examination as to his qualifications.
Did I just finish? I don't mean to.
Hold on, Attorney Stein.
Can I just be heard in regard to the objection?
Certainly.
What somebody is a psychiatrist has no relevance here. The doctors testified in regard to his personal credentials and his licensure, and what somebody else's degree is in is irrelevant. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so Attorney Stein,
Yes, Your Honor. It goes to credibility. It goes to.
I don't want to, I'm not going to ask you to dispute it in front of the jury. I'm going to sustain an objection relative to his understanding of a psychiatrist. We have a psychologist on the stand.
Is a psychologist able to prescribe medication?
No.
Is a psychiatrist able to prescribe medication?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance in regard to what a psychiatrist can do. He's not a psychiatrist.
Your
I'll
Honor,
allow that question.
is a psychiatrist who is a medical doctor able to prescribe medication?
Yes.
So, what you testified to on direct was, withdrawn. In fact, isn't a clinical psychologist with what you are trained in psychotherapy and therapeutic techniques?
That's partially true, yes.
Okay, well, to the extent that law firms, as you say, consult with you because you are at the cross-section between psychology and law, was that your testimony on direct?
As an explanation for forensic psychology, that was my answer.
So with regard then to the fact that you are paid by law firms to go into court and to render opinions within your field of specialty, isn't that correct?
I wouldn't put it that way. I don't think
It's
that's
a
accurate.
yes or no question, Doctor. Can you answer it yes or no?
Objection, Your Honor. He's trying
It's
to.
a yes or, it's a yes or no question.
Okay.
It's cross-examination, Your Honor.
I'm going to instruct the witness to answer the question. It is a yes or no. You can answer yes or no at this point in time.
Do you need me to repeat the question, Doctor?
Please.
So you indicated on direct that you are retained by law firms to go into court to testify as an expert within the area in which you are qualified to testify. Is that correct, yes or no?
No, that's not an accurate representation of my testimony.
A simple no without the further explanation, Doctor, on the yes or no question. If I ask you for further clarification.
I'm objecting to Attorney Stein directing a witness here. That's
All right,
where we can go.
sustained. Ask your questions, counsel.
I'm going to ask the court for an instruction once again to not go beyond the question that's asked.
So I'm going to ask the jury to step out for a moment, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Did the witness step out as well, Your Honor, or?
Oh, no, the witness is going to stay.
you.
So my instruction to the witness outside the presence of the jury, sir, you may be seated. I appreciate that. Is that if you are able to respond to the question as a yes or no, then respond yes or no. If you believe the question does not call for a yes or no response, or you're unable to respond, then that's different. We're not going to force you into responding to a question. You can seek clarification or just ask that the question be restated. Attorney Stein,
Yes, Your
if you're
Honor.
going to ask a question that you believe requires a yes or no answer, make sure that it requires a yes or no answer, and it's not a compound question. And also, when we are discussing objections and whether or not we are going to answer that objection, let's please keep the tone professional in front of the jury. I would appreciate that. Let's not interrupt one another and allow the court please to make a decision. And also, let's please be careful with speaking objections and narratives when we're responding to objections while we're in the presence of the jury. Thank you, counsel. You may be seated. Madam Clerk, please bring the jury back in. Thank you. Welcome back. Thank you. Seat. Please stipulate to the return of our jurors.
Yes, Your Honor.
Stipulate, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, so I am going to strike any question that was pending. If there was a question pending, I'm going to ask Attorney Stein to please ask his next question of the witness.
Did you state on direct, Doctor, that you consult with law firms as an expert to testify in the field that you are an expert in?
Yes.
My question to you, Doctor, is how much of your practice is committed to providing expert opinion to defense-minded law firms?
For criminal matters, most of it.
How about a number, please, Doctor, percentage?
I don't keep track of cases by number. I can't answer it better that way.
Well, let me ask it the other way then, Doctor. How many times have you testified as an expert witness for any governmental entity, whether it's a state's attorney's office, whether it's a district attorney's office? How many times?
Once.
One time. How many times have you testified as an expert for defense-related law firms?
Probably about 50 times.
So this private practice that you maintain outside of your clinical teaching assignments is almost completely dependent upon law firms for your expert opinion.
That's not accurate.
Okay. So now, you indicated, you started to talk to us about PCP. And I believe that you said to the defense, when Attorney Gavin was asking you, that you've been in private practice, or at least postgraduate degree, for approximately 22 years, am I right?
Since 2022.
2022, so 22 to 23 years, is my math correct?
Sounds reasonable.
And with regard to that, you told these people earlier, did you not, that you haven't done any clinical work with PCP-related patients in 22 or 23 years. Is that what you told them?
Well,
It's a yes or no question, please, doctor. Is that what you told them? Yes or no?
Your Honor, can I be instructed how to respond since I can't respond to the question this way?
If that was your, if do you know whether or not that was your testimony, yes or no?
That was not my testimony, no.
When was the last time, doctor, that you clinically worked with a PCP intoxicated patient?
Never.
Never. Dr. Frazier, do you have withdrawn? You told us you are not a medical doctor. Is that correct?
Objection.
Overruled.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, I testified that I'm not a medical doctor.
Do you hold any other degrees, any special training that you received in toxicology?
No.
So you came in to talk to us today, to these people, about what you know about PCP. As part of what you consulted, did you consult the DSM-5 Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition?
No.
Okay. You would agree with me that the DSM-5, as it's known, is sort of the primary reference for people who engage in your profession.
It's one of many references.
You would agree with me that in order to ultimately obtain some type of a diagnostic criteria, that psychologists and psychiatrists would consult the DSM-5 or earlier versions of it to see if their diagnosis comports to the recognized criteria. You would agree with that?
When rendering a diagnosis, yes. And also the International Classification of Disease.
Thank you.
That's another manual.
Thank you for that additional answer. With regard to the DSM-5, would you agree with me, in order for a clinician to withdraw, that the diagnostic criteria for PCP, phencyclidine intoxication, that they list various diagnostic criteria? Would you agree with me that that is contained within the DSM-5?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that the criteria include such things as nystagmus?
Yes.
Nystagmus is some type of an eye movement that someone is able to observe a person who is in the phencyclidine intoxication.
Yes.
Hypertension or tachycardia, is that one of the diagnostic criteria?
It can be.
How about numbness or diminished response to pain?
Yes.
How about ataxia?
Could be.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what ataxia is, please.
It's a physiological response
In what way?
It's essentially a physiological response that results in a problem with the central nervous system.
Dr. Frazier, isn't it true that ataxia is poor muscle control causing clumsy movement and can affect walk and balance, hand coordination, speech, swallowing, and eye movement? Isn't that what ataxia is?
All of those are possible.
How about dysarthria?
I'm not familiar with that in the research.
How about muscle rigidity? Is that one of the diagnostic criteria?
Sometimes that's called catatonia.
Okay. So how would then muscle rigidity differ then from seizure or coma?
With a seizure or coma, there's a loss of consciousness that's usually associated with that. With muscle rigidity, that doesn't necessarily happen.
So muscle rigidity, just by using the terms, would seem to indicate someone who is in PCP intoxication would be very tight, very rigid, inflexible. Isn't that muscle rigidity?
It's possible.
And isn't it also true that the DSM-5 indicates that laboratory testing is useful in determining a person on PCP because it can be detected in their system for up to 8 days?
That's possible.
So many of the things that you talked about, Doctor, on direct, the withdrawn. Doctor, would you agree with me that intoxicants, by their general nature, any intoxicant, reduces inhibition?
Yes,
It impairs judgment.
generally.
It can increase confidence.
In some instances.
So-called beer muscles, right? You've heard that term before, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It can impact mood, sometimes wildly.
I testified about that earlier.
You can be euphoric 1 minute and then irritable and depressed the next.
That's possible.
It can create negative interactions with people while a person is intoxicated.
That's common.
It can enhance negative feelings and emotions that people may have.
That's possible.
So let's explore that one for a second. So if I'm angry with somebody and I become intoxicated, my anger may become enhanced beyond simple what the moment called for. Would you disagree with that?
Well, I already testified earlier that aggression is a symptom and feature of PCP intoxication.
Is there a reason you don't want to answer the question that I asked you?
Objection, Your Honor.
My question
Sustained.
to you, Doctor, was, can it enhance a feeling that is otherwise a benign feeling? Does the alcohol or drugs enhance those negative feelings?
It's possible.
And would you agree with me that intoxicants as a general category have the ability to impair memory?
That's possible.
Where people can become blacked out on a vast amounts of different substances while they are under the influence of the substance.
That happens to some people.
So that this disassociated amnesia that you talk about is not unique to PCP.
It can happen with other substances.
Let's talk about some of those other substances, Doc. How about cannabis?
At high amounts, it's possible.
So, again, is cannabis intoxication covered in the DSM-5?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that the diagnostic criteria contained in the DSM-5 under Section 292.0 includes the following: irritability, anger, and aggression is the #1 criteria for cannabis intoxication.
Objection.
Overruled.
So I haven't refreshed myself with all of the pages of the DSM, so I
May I
can't
approach
answer
the
that
witness,
question.
please?
You may.
Would looking at the DSM-5 refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Let me know when you've refreshed your recollection, please. I believe we're over here, Doc. You're in cannabis withdrawal. I'm over here in intoxication.
Okay, Attorney Stein, you handed in the book. You can retreat back to your counsel's table, and when he is done, you can ask him if it refreshed his recollection, please.
I've finished, Your Honor.
Have you refreshed your recollection, Doctor?
Yes.
Excuse me, sorry.
Attorney Gavin?
I'm just waiting for the question.
Okay.
With regard to the DSM-5 criteria for diagnostic criteria for cannabis intoxication, have you refreshed your recollection?
Your Honor, my objection is this. There's no relevancy to marijuana intoxication. This witness wasn't offered as an expert in regard to marijuana intoxication. It's irrelevant to the proceedings. Thank you.
Attorney Stein?
I'm sorry?
Attorney Stein?
Yes, Your Honor. I would move at this point that we suspend Dr. Frazier and have Mr. Morales take the stand, since I've accommodated the defense with
All
regard
right,
to...
I'm going to ask the jury to step out, please. Thank you. I'm also going to ask the witness to exit the witness box, stand outside in the hallway. Thank you. All right, Attorney Stein, there's a relevancy argument that's been presented on objection. Now you're going into asking for the witness to be suspended. I'm not doing that. So what is the relevancy of the cannabis?
Mr. Morales, in his statements to the police, mentioned on at least one, if not more occasions, that his trip to Bridgeport was for the purpose of buying weed.
Okay, so Attorney Stein, this particular witness has been called to the stand to testify relevant to PCP. If you would like to ask him questions regarding a different intoxicant, perhaps we should lay the proper foundation if you'd like to inquire. If you would like to point out that he does not have that knowledge, that is fine. But again, I'll grant you a little bit of latitude, but you're going to keep in mind that this witness has been disclosed solely for the effects of PCP on the defendant.
Correct, Your Honor, but if the criteria for other intoxicants, which the defendant admits to pursuing, create similar diagnostic criteria for this doctor, the jury has the right to consider that.
Counsel, I understand that, but this doctor was called here for PCP use.
I understand, but
Okay.
if his opinion is based, if he's offering an opinion as to the effects of PCP on a human being, I should be able to explore him with regard to the effects of alcohol, which is another factor in this case. There is photographs of alcohol.
Attorney Stein, first lay the witnesses, you have to lay the foundation, first of all, whether or not he has the knowledge. He's not been disclosed as to having that knowledge. He's here to testify exclusively regarding the effects of PCP. I do not see anything in this disclosure that indicates that this witness has any expertise and or has any intent on testifying relative to other intoxicants. So when the witness indicates that they don't have a memory or they're not refreshed or they didn't review that material, you cannot display the type of display that you did. Hover over the witness here in the witness box while the witness is attempting to refresh recollection. I'm willing to grant you a little bit of leeway in asking him about his knowledge, the effect of other intoxicants, and see whether or not he'll be able to respond to that. So that's fine, but he has not been called here to testify regarding the DSM on cannabis use or any other drugs. He has been called here to testify solely for the effect of PCP. So
It's part of his basis of knowledge, Your Honor.
that is not part of the basis of his knowledge. Okay, so what?
He indicated on his testimony that the DSM-5, which everyone knows with regard to psychologists and
Okay.
psychiatrists.
Attorney Stein,
Yes,
I
sir.
understand that. But what I just saw right here was an expert who needed his memory refreshed on a substance that he was not intending to testify about. With a DSM guideline in front of the jury, you brought him the book, and then you hovered over him. I had to remind you to retreat back to your desk. Now we have an objection as to relevancy, and all I needed to really hear was the response to the objection on the relevancy, and I didn't need to hear it with any type of tone underlying the response. If you wanted to point out to his testimony as to the relevance, instead what you did is you immediately jumped up and asked for suspension of this particular witness until the defendant testifies. All right, so first of all, that's an inappropriate response to the objection regarding relevancy. All I'm asking you to do is respond to the relevancy objection.
And I've responded, Your Honor. I've indicated that based upon my knowledge of the case, the use of cannabis is in my opinion, fair game for an expert testifying as to the effects of PCP, as well as alcohol will be, based upon the fact that there is evidence already in front of this jury with regard to the use of alcohol at 6.5 Myrtle through the recycling container filled with alcohol cans. That is part of an exhibit. States, well, I didn't pull it. And again, I think that it is for a doctor to now indicate that he is qualified to testify as to a rare drug such as PCP and not otherwise qualified to talk about alcohol and cannabis my expectation would be disingenuous of the witness. But I will lay the foundation for it.
All right, that's fine. Attorney Stein, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to cite from the Notice of Service and Disclosure of Expert Witnesses in order to respond to Attorney Gavin's objection. And I will state that Dr. Frazier was notified as a witness who would be testifying as to the effects of a chronic history of drug dependence, specifically cannabis dependence and PCP dependence, and the effect that that has on a user. So I will allow the testimony, but I am going to remind counsel to please note demeanor in responding to objections. I'm simply asking for a response to those objections, and if the witness has to be refreshed, please hand the witness the document to refresh recollection, retreat to counsel's table, and then we'll do it appropriately, ask if the recollection has been refreshed, and then re-ask the question.
I will just indicate to the court, as I presented my book, my notes that were in it, Dr. Frazier was flipping through my notes and not the DSM book that I was asking him to look at.
Okay, well then perhaps we won't provide the witness the notes at the same time of the provision of the book. Is there anything further that the court needs to address before I bring this jury back in?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, we'll bring the jury back in. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The jury, could we please bring Dr. Frazier back in?
Stipulate to the presence, maybe.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I'm going to direct you to retake the stand. Thank you. Just going to remind you, please come on up, have a seat. You do remain under the obligations of your oath. Attorney Stein, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Dr. Frazier, with regard to cannabis intoxication pursuant to the DSM-5, would you agree with me that the diagnostic criteria includes looking for clinical significant problematic behavior or psychological changes such as impaired motor coordination,
Yes.
euphoria,
Yes.
anxiety,
Yes.
a sensation of slowed time,
Yes.
impaired judgment,
Yes.
and that marijuana intoxication can create impairment in short-term memory,
Yes, it can.
difficulty carrying out complex tasks,
That's possible.
distorted sensory perceptions,
That's possible.
and that those effects can last about 3 to 4 hours.
It depends.
And would you agree with me as well, doctor, that alcohol intoxication is another intoxicant that is specifically referenced in the DSM-5?
Yes.
And would you agree with me, Dr. Frazier, that amongst the diagnostic criteria for alcohol intoxication is slurred speech,
Objection, same objection as previous.
Overruled.
slurred speech,
Yes.
incoordination,
Yes.
unsteady gait,
Yes.
nystagmus again,
Yes.
impairment in attention or memory,
It's possible.
that it can create aggressive behavior,
It's possible.
impaired judgment,
Possible.
it can create blackouts,
That's possible.
So with regard then to this concept of disassociated amnesia, right, that can occur as a result of alcohol, cannabis. Those two things can cause dissociated amnesia.
Amnesia can occur with those depending on the amount of use.
How about dextromethorphan, cough syrup? Can you have dissociated amnesia with cough syrup?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I'm sorry?
Overruled.
I would have to refresh with that.
How about just common, everyday prescribed medications, such as anxiety medications, benzodiazepines?
Well, there's a long list of side effects and warnings that come with all kinds of prescription medication, and we could go through every single medication and go down a list, and there's a possibility, but it doesn't mean that that happens to every single person every single time. It depends on the dosage and the quantity used, and or if it's being used effectively or misused.
Thank you. And that same thing holds true for PCP, doesn't it? What you just said to the end of the question that I asked you, that applies every bit to PCP, doesn't it?
Objection to the form of the question.
Overruled.
Yes, it does apply.
And as a matter of fact, you have absolutely no idea what substance, if any, Jose Morales may have been using the weekend of December of 2019.
Objection, Your Honor. Now, this is outside the scope of the expert disclosure.
Overruled.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
You have absolutely no idea what substances, if any, Jose Morales was using the weekend of December 1st, 2019.
I don't know.
And regarding this concept of dissociative amnesia, you would agree with me that just because a person suffers from dissociative amnesia, that does not mean that they lack the ability to engage in purposeful, goal-directed behavior. Correct? Do you need me to ask the question again?
I don't think that's accurate.
Okay? So you believe that simply you are correlating memory, the ability to imprint or recall a memory, that is, in your opinion, evidence that the person cannot engage in goal-directed behavior?
Objection to the form of the question. It's a compound question.
Sustained.
Dr. Frazier, if someone is in a blacked out state, right, does that mean that they lack the capacity to engage in goal-directed behavior?
When someone's in a blacked out state, that means that they're intoxicated, and when they're intoxicated, their behavior is impaired.
Agreed.
And not goal-directed.
Agreed. Well, not goal-directed? So let me ask you this, doctor. Every party that every person in this courtroom went to in college at some point in time where someone became intoxicated and put the lampshade on their head and didn't remember it in the morning, are you saying that that was involuntary, unconscious behavior?
I'm saying what I just said before and testified to, that it's impaired behavior by a toxic substance.
Agreed. And in fact, every one of those people the next morning that's holding onto the toilet and praying that they don't ever feel this way again, that don't remember, are you saying that that was not goal-directed behavior?
Yes, I'm saying it's, like I testified to before, it's impaired behavior and it's impaired judgment. Thinking and reasoning is impaired, meaning decisions are poorly effectuated.
But that doesn't mean that they were not goal-driven. That means that they were impaired, but not involuntary.
Objection to the form of the question. It's a compound question.
Sustained.
Doctor, you indicated that you read through some things prior to coming into court today. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that.
Okay. are you aware that the defense, in response to a demand from the state for the materials that you referenced to formulate your opinions here today, that they provided 3 articles as a sample of what you reviewed prior to coming into court today?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that one was entitled Phencyclidine Ingestion, Drug Abuse and Psychosis by Jacob and Carolyn? Was that one of the ones you reviewed?
That sounds familiar.
And in fact, that's a paper that was written in 1981, 44 years ago. Would you agree with me?
I would prefer to refresh.
May I approach you on?
You may.
Okay, I'm refreshed, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Would you agree with me that this paper was written in 1981, which is 44 years ago?
Yes.
And would you agree that you also reviewed a report, Phencyclidine Abuse and Crime, a psychiatric perspective by Jauman and Jauman?
That sounds familiar?
And would you agree with me, Doctor, that this article was written in 1982, 43 years ago?
I would like to refresh if I may, Your Honor. Okay, I'm done.
And would you agree with me that that article was written 43 years ago?
It was published in 1982.
This is 2025, am I correct, Doctor?
Yes.
Would that be 43 years ago?
I'm not a math major, but that sounds correct.
I understand. Doctor, would you agree with me that disassociation is a disruption in the normal integrated functions of memory and consciousness?
Those are features of dissociation, yes.
Doctor, are you aware of the studies, did you review any of the studies that recognize that nearly 1/3 of all people who are accused of violent crime, 30%, claim amnesia for that offense?
I'm not familiar with the study you're referencing, but if you show it to me, I can answer it better.
Sure. Well, let's go on. Doctor, you will agree with me that high stress hormones, glucocorticoids, they can negatively impact the function of brain structures necessary for the encoding and retrieval of information.
I'm not familiar with that particular study that you're referencing.
I'm not referencing a study generally, but are you familiar that stress hormones can impact memory and recall?
Generally speaking, I'm familiar that cortisol is related to stress. It's correlated with stress. And when people,
So,
Your Honor, may I ask?
I'll allow the witness to finish the question, allow the witness to finish the answer. Go ahead.
That cortisol is related to stress, and when it's elevated, it is usually correlated, meaning associated with people experiencing high levels of stress. And when people are highly stressed, it can impair their memory.
okay. So now, in fact, isn't that concept referred to as a readout? When someone is angry, when someone is upset, they have an elevated cortisol level that people who are highly emotional, highly upset, highly stressed out can go into what they call a readout.
I'm not familiar with the term readout.
Taking out the term, would you disagree a person who is under high stress, highly emotional, and upset can create the stress hormone cortisol that you talked about, and that can cause a dissociated amnesic state?
I'm not familiar with that outcome.
Are you familiar with the research, Dr. Frazier, that talks about people who claim complete amnesia in an event, that is an extremely rare occurrence?
Objection, Your Honor. Not what this witness is offered for is an expertise. This is far afield.
He is
Counsel, if you'd like to ask him about the research, state the research, and I'll allow the question.
Sure. In a 2017 paper published by the J.M. Acad of Psychiatric Law at 45:147-60, entitled Disassociation, Defining the Concept in Criminal Forensic Psychology by Dominic Bork, B-O-U-R-G-E-T, M.D., Pierre Gagny, M.D., and Stephen Floyd Wood, M.D. Are you familiar with that publication?
I'm not, but if you show it to me, I can refresh and see if I'm more familiar with it.
I'll come back to that after the break, Your Honor, since I only have my own notes at this point. I will retrieve the article for
Okay,
him,
Fine. We'll
but I
move
will
on.
come back to that line of questioning. Are you familiar with the term malingering, doctor?
Yes.
What is malingering?
Feigning symptoms.
Well, you would agree with me that in a person who is making a claim of a lack of memory, that there is a possibility that the person is malingering.
It's a possible hypothesis.
And in fact, you would agree with me that there is testing that people such as yourself can conduct to determine whether a person is malingering or not.
It can be part of a protocol.
Something called the symptoms validity test. Is that one of the tests that a person could be administered to determine whether they are malingering or not?
It can be part of a protocol, yes.
Testing of memory malingering, that so-called Tom's test, is that another one?
It can be part of the protocol, yes.
And as a person, you testified for direct that what you do is the intersection of psychology and law. Do you remember making that statement?
Yes.
That is within your field of expertise.
Yes, forensic psychology.
May I have 1 second, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
And amongst the reasons why a person may malinger and feign amnesia, Dr. Frazier, would be if they are charged in a crime in an attempt to obstruct the police investigation and to avoid responsibility for it.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Would you agree with me, Doctor, that another reason a person may malinger is that they are ashamed of their actions?
Objection.
Sustained.
Excuse me. Dr. Frazier, you will agree with me that PCP is a NM, excuse me. PCP is an NMDA receptor antagonist.
I don't recall. I haven't memorized the molecular structure of all of the drugs that I'm familiar with.
Well, isn't that the portion of the brain, doctor, that PCP directly affects, the NMDA receptor antagonist?
I think the clearer way to say it is that it affects the area of the brain that's associated with perceptual functioning and memory functioning, and then more broadly, cognitive functioning, meaning the ability to think rationally and clearly.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying it for me. So what you're basically saying is that it disrupts neural function by affecting translation.
Objection to the form of the question. That's Attorney Stein's testimony, not the doctor's.
I'm asking him a question to see if he agrees with me, Your Honor.
You're asking him if that's what he is basically saying. So I'll sustain relative to the form of the question. If you want to present the question in a different manner, go ahead.
Dr. Frazier, does PCP usage disrupt neural function by affecting translation?
I would say it affects neural function by impairing processes of the brain that I testified to earlier: perceptual functioning, sensory functioning, memory functioning, thinking and reasoning.
So this neural discoordination that you're talking about, isn't that neural discoordination?
I would call it neuropsychological discoordination.
These things that you've been talking about, they are directly linked, as you say, to cognitive and sensory motor impairment.
Objection to the form of the question.
I'll allow it.
That's true.
And thereby impacting function.
That's true.
And the functions that are affected are cognitive control,
That's what I just said.
attention and motor coordination.
I also testified about that.
In fact, aren't these all executive function portions of the brain?
No, sensory perception is not always associated or part of executive functioning. Executive functioning is more associated with fixed attention and concentration and sustaining focus.
Okay? So executive functions are part of the cognitive process, are they not, doctor?
Yes, that's part of the brain process.
In fact, the executive function, don't they often help us regulate, self-regulate, plan, prioritize, and to sustain efforts towards goals?
Executive functioning is associated with those features.
So is it fair to say that executive function is the CEO of the brain, that it facilitates the translation from wanting to do something to actually doing it?
Objection, Your Honor. This is not what he has been offered as an expert.
I'll allow it. Overruled.
I haven't seen the term CEO of the brain the way you're describing it.
But you would agree with me that it facilitates the transaction from wanting to do something to actually doing it.
I'd say it's part of the process from a brain function standpoint.
And in fact, signs and symptoms of executive dysfunction, withdrawn. The key components, as you started to say, working memory, is that a key component of executive function?
It's associated with it.
And that's the holding of information temporarily so that you can work with it?
Yes.
Doctor, is there a reason I'm here and you're looking over at Attorney Gavin?
Excuse me, counsel sustained.
Working memory, is that holding information temporarily to work with it?
Working memory functions that way.
Response inhibition, is that controlling impulses and delaying gratification?
It's part of it.
Set shifting, is that the adapting to changing demands and switching between tasks?
I'm not recently familiar with that term. I may have read it in graduate school.
That was 23 years ago?
A little bit longer.
How about cognitive flexibility, the adapting or changing behavior or switching between tasks?
I don't understand the question, Your Honor.
Is a key
Excuse me, counsel. So the witness has indicated that he doesn't understand
I will
the question.
re-ask the question
Please re-ask the
differently.
question, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is cognitive flexibility, would you agree that that is the adapting or changing behavior or the ability to switch between tasks?
I would say switching between tasks is an example of cognitive flexibility.
And a person who is cognitively impaired, would you agree that they would have difficulty planning, organizing, or prioritizing tasks?
That's what I testified to earlier.
How about, would you agree with me that challenges with time management and staying on track?
Again, I apologize, Your Honor. I don't understand the question.
You can re-ask the question.
Sure. A person who is cognitively impaired, where their executive functions are impaired, do they suffer from challenges with time management and staying on track?
It's possible.
Does a person who is suffering with an executive function cognitive impairment have trouble task completion and following multi-step instructions?
That's possible.
A person with a cognitive impairment or a executive function impairment, do they have problems focusing, concentrating, and paying attention?
That's possible. We tend
Does-
to call that diagnostically attention deficit disorder.
Does a person with a cognitive impairment or an executive function issue struggle with motivation or initiating tasks?
It's possible.
Does a person with cognitive disorder, impairment, or executive function impairment have an inflexible thinking and difficulty adapting to changes?
It's possible.
So, for instance, doctor, would you agree with me that a person driving an automobile, that requires sustained attention and goal destination?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Doctor, would you agree with me that a driver needs to maintain focus on the road?
Sustained.